Welcome back to the Tail Researchers and HE Researchers series. I'm Piyun Wong. I don't think I need to introduce myself anymore. I'm, of course, joined with my best buddy, best co-host, John Brindle. Would you like to just say hi to people, John?
Hello, everyone. Hope you're all okay today. I'm
Um,
John.
It's good to see you back. I just feel like, because Martin is a good friend of mine also, I just feel like this could be a bit more informal. And of course, we have got Dr. Martin Compton here with us today, and Martin is the AI and Education Innovation Lead and Program Module and Assessment Design Lead. Important people tend to have long job titles, and it is the case in Martin's job from King's College London. Apologies for that. So I first met Martin, I think, a few years ago on social media, and we've just been talking. But in reality, the first time I actually met him in person was this year. But I just had to run to him and gave him a big hug because I feel like we've known each other for a long time, particularly in the last few years. Whenever I had some kind of professional, important presentation interview, I always ask Martin, can you give me a hand? Can you do some practice with me? He's never said no. He's always been really helpful. So I think my successes today, Martin has played an important part in that as well. And I think that shows the teacher in him, and this is what he's going to talk about today. So today is not going to be a presentation, it's going to be a conversation between myself, Martin, and John. Martin, would you like to introduce yourself in a better way than I have just done?
Well, I can't top that, Piyun. Thanks very much. Thanks, John, as well. It's really nice to be here. I mean, it's great. I say yes to things because, I respect work that other people are doing, and I've respected and valued when people have said yes to me in the past, and I want to be that person. Although on my things, my resolutions for the new academic year is saying no to more things, because I probably did too much external work last year, but I would never say no to you. And so I found myself saying yes to this thing, and then when I realized what it was that you were focusing on, which is essentially me, I came over all shaky and nervy, and imagine me just talking to you two with nobody else rocking up. And that's not a false modesty or anything. I mean, it really is part of my researcher identity that I think I'm somehow doing a different kind of research or a different kind of teaching or being a different kind of academic to everybody else. I'm sort of like down here on this pretend rung, and everybody else is up on this super elite and competent rung. And if I could just reach that platform, then I would feel more comfortable in myself. But you've given me a lot of pause to think, actually, so I do appreciate that. And it's nice to be here, and it's nice to be not talking about AI for a change, because that's all I've been banging on about for the last year.
But you've been more than just AI, though, haven't you? Because I think we had a long conversation in the form of my podcast to talk about authentic assessment, ungrading, that kind of stuff. So, you have been more than AI, and because I think your identity is a generous teacher, an educator. You want to kind of, share knowledge with the community. I think that's my impression anyway. And we'll go into all that in a minute. But as this is a researcher series, my first question is always going to be, how did you get into research? Because it's a choice, isn't it? It's not something that you just fall into, or maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. And obviously, I was fortunate in that you forewarned me that this would be your opening gambit. And so I spent an inordinate amount of time thinking about this. And what I realized was that what I would say in response to that question now is different to how I would have responded at the time when the first bits of research I was doing were happening. Because, I mean, essentially, I've been teaching for 30 odd years, 32 years, I think, in December it will be. And I always kind of lump all the research I've done in terms of my PhD and my university part of my teaching career. But I only started teaching full-time, working full-time in the university in 2015 when I went to Greenwich. So all of that time before, from 1995 to 2015, I wasn't in higher education. But then what I realized was that actually I'd been doing research when I was working in schools, when I was working in further education, particularly in further education, and I didn't think it was research, even though it was called research. And even though I called it research, it was somehow different to the kind of research that I would imagine academics were doing in their ivory towers, and smoking pipes and wearing jackets with patches on the sleeve or whatever it was. Those sort of stereotypes that I imagine really sort of tainted my self-concept and devalued in my own mind what I was doing. But I would say, to give you a really specific answer, that the first bits of research I did were action research, so like experimental research. So before Moodle was a thing, we had WebCT, a college I was working at in the 90s, and I was one of the first teachers at Tower Hamlets College, as it was then, to put my program onto WebCT. And we did some experimental stuff around that, and then we did some more nuanced stuff around trying to engender contributions in discussion forums. And it was, I discovered in the 90s that you put your life and soul into the perfect discussion prompt in a forum, and only 10% of your students will engage with it if you're lucky. 'Twas ever thus then, and it is the same now, and people keep discovering the same thing. But that was research, right? And I even wrote something for Furl, as it was then, that kind of morphed into JISC and published that online. And it, subsequently, I look back on that and thought, well, that wasn't proper research, but bloody hell, it was. I mean, it really was. And it's really important that we value that kind of research, because I was teaching 25 hours a week. You don't have much time for that kind of thing. Not that, academics aren't busy or whatever, but 25 hours a week takes it out of you. So you're inevitably doing this in your spare time. So yeah, a long time ago, donkey's years ago is the answer. I should have just started with that, shouldn't I?
I thought you were a couple of years older than me.
I'm probably a lot years older than you.
I mean, I'm 28. I thought you just turned 30 last year.
You're so funny.
Well, John's the oldest here.
Oh, definitely not.
I'm looking at Gerhard. Yeah.
Sorry, I just completely derailed conversation.
My apologies.
So, Joe, I'm going to step in and bring this to a bit more of a sensible thing. So, yeah, you've alluded a little bit to what you did prior to kind of engaging in higher education and higher education research and things like that. So just give us a little bit of a potted history of Martin Compton. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your history and your what you did previously and where you came from and what resulted in you getting into higher education.
I think it's an interesting question, even to me. I don't know whether people will find the answer interesting, but very long story short, I did okay in my O levels, as they were, as GCSEs in modern currency, and surprised everyone. My uncle Charlie said, "I'll give you 10 quid for every O level you get," and I was dual entered for the lower level CSEs for every single one, and my parents had to pay for me to be entered to O levels because they thought I was going to fail everything, because I was a bit of a wastrel and a bit of a hooligan, funnily enough, actually, when I was 15 or whatever. I passed the lot of them, and my uncle Charlie had to give me 90 quid, which was a lot of money in those days, and I bought a bike with it. It was great. Yeah, so because of that, I surprised myself and I surprised everyone. And they said, well, you may as well do A levels then, because I was going to maybe do something vocational. I wanted to do journalism. But I started A levels, and I couldn't have been a worse fit for A levels. Absolutely hated it. Dropped out after a couple of months. So left school just on my 17th birthday. And I went to work in a petrol garage. I was a petrol pump attendant. Don't have those anymore. And then I worked in Harrods for 2 years, and then hated that. And then I worked overseas. I was a light commercial driver. I worked across the whole of Europe, 7.5 ton trucks and stuff like that. That was great for 3 years, but it paid terribly. And I was sedentary, so I got really fat. And because I was driving in sunny Europe, I got suntan down one side of my face. I had one very, very dark arm and one very pasty arm. And in the end, I thought I need some solidity. And I met somebody there who said, you know, you're really interested in politics. Because I spent some time in Berlin. This is before the wall came down. This is how long ago it was. And I was chatting with some people there, and they were talking, you know, about the fall of communism and everything, really radical stuff. And someone said, why don't you do a degree? And I said, I hate students, horrible, I hate students, you know, all these prejudices. But I was persuaded, and I used my sort of experience of Europe to sort of define my degree path, which was in politics. And yeah, kind of just really got interested in that, and got interested in teaching, taught English as a foreign language, again overseas for a little while in South America, and then did a whole bunch of stuff. Taught in secondary school, taught in the school that my daughter's now at for a year, GCSE English to 16-year-old girls. That was the worst experience of my life because I was terrible at it. But you know, you become a better teacher as a consequence, and you know, I'm getting the hang of it now, and I hope before I retire I'll teach the perfect lesson. You know, but you know, as you evolve, you want to find out more, and you want to find out if you're doing things the right way. You can either stagnate, just repeat year on year on year on year, take that lesson plan out of that folder, do that lesson, or you can iterate. And I think iteration is a fundamental part of research, because you're testing, aren't you? And if you then take it to the next level where you start formalizing the approach, or having a comparison of two different groups, or you disseminate through various channels at conferences and what have you, then that is the full research cycle. And it might not look like £1 million project that some of my academic colleagues get funding for here, but it's the same process in essence. And I'm proud of it now. I wish I'd been more proud of it then when I'd started.
Well, we are proud of you.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was really interesting to hear, Martin.
Yeah,
particularly about the suntan. I think the suntan's the.
It's still not quite equalised, I think, even after like 30 years. It's still a slightly darker side of it.
I think I remember you posted some pictures of that on social media once upon a time, about you standing sort of in front of a truck, like, you know. So I remember that when you were saying that, I was like, yeah, I think I remember seeing something, the younger Martin then.
I think I also posted something with me standing on the front of a train, because I worked on a train going from Calais to Perpignan for a whole summer season. And I even drove the train once. I took 4 cans of beer to the driver, and he stood in the corner drinking these cans of beer while I held the dead man's handle, and drove the train a little bit too fast into Lyon station. Yeah, there you go. It sounds unlikely, but it's true, I swear.
I mean, can you come and drive my train to work? Because it's always late. I can almost always see the station in front of me, and it just has to stop.
Well, I do know how. You do this. That's it.
I'll give it a go next time. If I get arrested, I'll give the police station your number to come and bail me out. Thank you very much. So you've mentioned a little bit about, you know, you're into kind of like, you know, teaching and sharing knowledge, etc. Is that where you get your inspiration from? Just kind of like, you know, trying to make people's lives better through education, changing lives, etc. Because you know, you're interested in many things from where I'm seeing, you know, and I think the common thread across all your interests is the student experience.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of like noble, and you know, I wouldn't want to characterize myself in that way, but you know, the bulk of my early teaching was in further education, and it was in widening participation programs, so access programs as they were. There are very few of them now, and this was all about giving adults an opportunity to re-engage with education who'd been failed by the system, didn't fit with A levels, and I saw myself in that. You know, I'm weirdly neurodiverse. I had real problems with my writing when I was at school and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's as true now as it was then, that the system is very tunnel vision and narrow, and you can only succeed if you change your shape to fit the shape of education as it is. There are very few options for people. So what I'm interested in is, because, you know, that's me, and I guess I don't want other people to go through that. You know, my daughter, my son, I don't want them to experience that. And so, you know, it's probably more self-interest or personal interest that drives me. But yeah, I think that we don't do very well by our students. And a lot of my students now, as someone who works in academic development, are my colleagues. And I don't think we do well by our colleagues. You know, everybody is like required to fit a particular shape and do things in a particular way. And the reason for that is because that's the way we've always done it. When I was at school, I had a really inspiring English teacher who said, you know, when people tell you reasons why they can't be done, they'll tell you because we can't afford it. That's not a reason why it shouldn't be done. They'll tell you because we've always done it this way. That's not a reason why we shouldn't do things. So appeals to cost and appeals to convention and conservatism are stuck with me as a reason to say, actually, that's not an argument. Tell me why we shouldn't do it, and then we'll deal with the money. And actually, that is what defines my approach. So people saying, we can't do that. And I would say, well, actually, we can. So you mentioned ungrading. You know, I haven't actually done any formal research, I suppose, but experimentation with this. Actually, I have. I'm lying. I did some when I was at Bradford, but that sort of that idealism. Oh, you can't do that because it's not allowed. The system doesn't let you. Is that true? And pushing the boundaries and challenging a lot of what is myth around what is allowed and not allowed in universities. You know, people say, well, you can't ungrade. Well, PhDs are ungraded, so why can't I do that at another level? First year doesn't contribute to most degree classifications. Why can't I ungrade that? You know, what's wrong with pass-fail? I ran a pass-fail PG cert. Why couldn't other programs be pass-fail? If you believe in that and sign up to it, the only way to persuade people that you can do that is to pilot or experiment or compare or do it. Because people have argued the case for donkey's years now. There's enough scholarship. Don't need to do that research. You need to do the application research, the experimentation research. So that's kind of, yeah. So my inspiration kind of comes from that, but to suggest it, you know, like I should be wearing a cape or something is really, really far from the truth. It's like, I'm just interested in leveling the opportunities a little bit because it's so unfair and so, you know, oriented towards people with privilege. I mean, it really is. So many of us are marginalized in so many ways. And, you know, I present as I actually from a mixed heritage, but, you know, people see me as white, so I get white privilege. But I come from a working class background and I've got a London accent, so that comes with its own stuff. And I carry huge chips on my shoulder about identity and everything. And that affects the way that you engage. You know, it really does. I think it's really important.
And I think what you're saying about, you know, you don't think what you're doing is humble, etc. But I think it is. And what I wanted to say is I've changed since starting my PhD 4 years ago from thinking research is for the greater good to now what you know what research is about me. What I want to know. Everyone else is secondary. So I think it's important that, you know, someone like yourself realize what you are interested rather than doing something that someone thinks could benefit other people, because it doesn't matter. It's what you want to do. If you're not passionate about something, people can see that. People can see through that very, very easily. I think anyway. It shows in how you know, like in just the last 20 minutes or so, the way you talk, I can feel the passion. I'm sure other people can feel that as well. If you were saying this thing as if, well, because I have a job title as innovation lead, someone just asked me to innovate. I think we can see through that. So yeah.
Well, that's
basically what I'm saying is, I love you, Martin. I know you're married. That's disappointing, but never mind. Over to you, John.
I wasn't expecting that.
but you know me well enough. There's always a curveball for me.
So I think really it's kind of, I mean, you've alluded to AI and that you're happy not to talk about it. So maybe the question that I was going to ask, what are you currently working on? But I'm going to say, other than AI, what are you currently working on? Because I think it's quite, you know, I mean, you can feel free to talk about the AI stuff as well, because I think some people will be interested in what you're doing around that. But it'd be interested to know what other things you're working on too.
I mean, it is dominated by AI. But having said that, the big project that I've got underway at the moment is with Becky Lindner, who I work with here at King's. We're co-editing a special issue of the Journal for Learning and Development in Higher Education. And what a job that is. I mean, you know, when you're coordinating other people's research and facilitating peer reviews and all of that kind of stuff, and deciding what's in and what's out and how it's going to be clustered and everything, it is such a huge undertaking, and it's a completely different part of the research world. So that is taking up a lot of my cognitive space at the moment. So we're just getting to the end of the first round of reviews. We've got 39 submissions. You know, it's a big undertaking, and that is the special issue is around compassionate pedagogy, ungrading, myth busting the modern academy. These are the themes that we've focused on, and it, you know, I know I'm biased, but I just think it's going to be a great read, because every single paper that, and I've read all of them, either skim or fully, is interesting. It's like, you know, one of our criteria for acceptance for the first round of abstract reviews, I think we had 60 or something submissions, 60 or 70, was, will you read the full version of this? That was one of our things. And if the two reviewers said, don't think so, then we look very carefully at the other criteria to see whether it was in or not, because we want stuff that people will read. And I think, you know, going back to what I was saying earlier, I'm changing the subject a little bit here, John, but if you bear with me, I'm trying to establish a thread in my own head. When I was working at Ealing, Hammersmith and West London College, as it was known, I ran a module on an MA in education for University of Westminster called Teaching HE in FE. So teaching higher education modules in FE. And the biggest single complaint that FE practitioners have is that they get zero respect from their HE counterparts. So they're treated like they don't know anything, that they're worthless. I mean, it's awful. You do feel like it's the Cinderella surface, and you really feel like HE are the ugly sisters and you are Cinderella. You know, you're beautiful, but nobody can perceive that. And in this module, teaching HE and FE, I would encourage my colleagues to look at some research related to their disciplinary area and get them to unpick it. I cherry picked it a little bit, but get them to unpick this. And very often these would be from 4-star journals submitted by academics from Oxford or Cambridge or whatever. And they would unpick it. And I said, I don't understand I don't get this. And then they would say, hang on a minute. This is basically saying all 6 of us interviewed 2 people and they said some really uncontroversial things. And now we've used loads of long words to express that. And we've got a publication with our names on it. Surely I'm missing something. And I was like, no, you're not. Well, we could bloody well do that. Why don't you? Well, I haven't got time. Well, maybe we can find a way to get over that identity crisis and get through this and not replicate that, because, you know, one citation, nobody's read it. What's the point? You know, there's a kind of merry-go-round, isn't there? There's a whole merry-go-round. And think about ways that we can do research that's useful for us and do research that we can disseminate in other ways. So I'm a massive fan of informal dissemination channels. So when Puyin says, come and talk to me on my podcast, I say, yeah, because more people will listen to that than anything I can publish on ungrading. More people will read my blog. You know, I get about 1,000 hits a month on my blog. And, you know, that's much more than any of my research papers. I've got a formal academic research paper that was preprint published in 2020, print published in 2022. And we've got about 10 citations on it. The effort that it took from the proposal through the ethics, through the research, formal channels, and then through the publication to get to a position where maybe 3 people have used our work in a meaningful way. I'm thinking, actually, that's not valuable for me. So I have done. I mean, that was on transnational education. That I've done a ton of stuff around different aspects of digital education. But I think that we need to value the informal, and the kind of things that that I've been talking about here are just as good research, probably better, even if the funders and the people that are going to promote us in our jobs might not necessarily share that view. But if more of us say that this is valuable and useful, so the wheels turn and eventually we'll chip away. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
That's cool. I was nodding enthusiastically about your comments around FE and HE and the dynamics there. I spent 10 years teaching in FE, and really can see that. And when you're faced with people telling you, well, I've got my FHEA, so I know that I'm a good teacher. And I've had conversations like that, and then you realize, oh, you don't know anything. You've not taught 25 hours a week and had to mark 150 papers a week, for all your students.
Mm-hmm.
I very sympathise with that. So I'm sorry, I'm going to hijack a little bit, Puyin, if that's okay. But do you think that things like action research are important in those kinds of contexts and stuff like that, where you're actually, living and breathing it, and then perhaps being able to produce something from the actions that you're undertaking and doing it in that kind of methodological way?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I mean, one thing that I learned fairly early on was that you have to really consider what your definition of research is and what your definition of innovation is. But that, because every context is different, trying something in a different context is a worthwhile endeavor. And if you want to formalize it a little bit, put some protocols in, that's absolutely fine. Or if you just want to do an experimental thing based on a peer observation that you've set up, then that's also fine. And we shouldn't devalue this, because I've learned more, I suppose, from seeing other people in action, or talking to other people that I work closely with, or trying something for myself, than I have from any published research, really. You get inspiration from published research, but then you need to apply it in context. And that application in context is research in its own right. And I don't think that holds nearly enough status or credibility or value in the minds of lots of people, even though it's the thing that, if I had my way and I was principal of a further education college, I would give people action research time. I would make that a priority for everything that you do. Spend too long auditing and getting people to fill in pieces of paper and documents, particularly in FE, as to be said. But the same poison afflicts us in higher education as well. But giving people that time back to do something. And if you want to disseminate it at a conference, great. If you want to write a blog post about it, great. If you want to publish in a 4-star journal, that's fantastic, but it will take you 3 years. And all the people publishing on ChatGPT at the moment, I don't really see the point in going through the sort of highbrow journal 2-year research phase, because it's all out of date. I mean, some brilliant stuff being put out by Sue and others, for example, that's, we've done this so fast and turned it around so rapidly that it's got value and it's got use. And a lot of that is based on experimentation, research by another name. It's just what you call it.
Thanks for that, Martin. I was just interested to hear your thoughts on action research and stuff.
So over to me. We can't talk about research without talking about theories. Love them or hate them, that's part and parcel of being a researcher. I know that your PhD, you used activity theory.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still your favorite theory, or has your mind changed?
I tell you what, when I first started that, trying to identify a theoretical framework. So initially, when I put my proposal in, I wanted to do something around digital CPD, what I called eCPD at the time, using TPAC and other familiar frameworks. And activity theory was kind of on my horizon. And then I thought, you know what? I think I want to do something that's more about democratization and liberation and all of that kind of stuff. So I turned my focus to non-evaluative approaches to observing teaching, so being the observer and learning and being observed and learning. and different dynamics around that. And activity theory just lent itself really, really well to that. And it, constructing activity systems is a satisfying thing to do. So, in all my nerdish sadness, I sometimes think of activity systems based on, planning my holiday, or, what I'm going to do next in a social situation where I'm feeling really awkward, or whatever. It actually occurs to me. But in terms of the broad theoretical framework I've probably used most in formal publication is Eileen Kennedy's models of CPD. It's pretty old now, but it's so useful to stimulate discussion. She's got 3 broad categories and 9 different models of CPD types. And I've used it for a few publications, both related to and not related to digital education per se. And it just, why I like it, and why I also like activity theory actually, is because it provides a stimulus for the design of your research, and then it provides the analytical lens through which to look at the outcomes of your research. So it fits both things really nicely, and not all theoretical frameworks lend themselves so neatly in those kinds of ways. But I think theories around equity and social justice and critical pedagogy are probably more closely aligned, but so much vaguer in terms of the way that research that I do is shaped, because it's defining a value base. It's talking about democratizing the classroom. It's talking about deliberately subverting the status quo. I mean, I've mentioned it already, and it's so the theory isn't necessarily about the thing that you are researching, but it becomes the theory that pushes you towards the reason why you choose the thing that you're researching. I don't know if that makes sense. So yeah, so those are kind of broad areas that I really like. I think if theories are over complex, from my simple little brain, then, and you have to spend your time getting your head around them, then they lose their utility. I think a theory is a heuristic. It's a lens. It's a way of understanding something. And if I have to spend half my time understanding what Bourdieu said or whatever, then you've lost me already. And I know so many people have used, French philosophical lenses for this reason, and it just completely loses me. I'm not interested in that at all. And that's not to diminish anybody whose research who's doing stuff around that, but I just don't get it, because the theoretical framework is there. And I'm thinking, hang on, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to read that again, because that's like got 7 words in 10 word sentence I don't actually understand. And I think it's because of the nature of my education. When you leave school at 16, I didn't do A levels. My degree was, I did a humanities degree at a polytechnic, and it just exposed in different ways. I was first generation student. I didn't come from a family that read French philosophy around the dinner table or whatever it is. And I think not having that exposure is really alienating, and it puts barriers up. So, I mean, I maybe even some people think I've been rude just now, and I know that I can come over as being dismissive and rude, and I don't mean to, but it's like, it scares me. And it's that kind of thing that I think is really, really off-putting for me, and dare I say it, people like me. And sometimes we do a whole emperor's new clothes things where we sort of like pretend that we're doing the proper job by using big words, or what. It feels like a game to me, and it feels really artificial and fake. And I love plain talking, and I love straightforward expression, and I really do not like the sort of pseudo intellectual claptrap which underpins a lot of stuff that I'm obligated to read for my job. And just tell me what you think and why you think it. And if it helps to have a framework, then throw it at me. But I'm not spending a week working out what the flipping theory is before I can even understand your research. And yeah, I didn't realize I was going to be quite so angry and strident in response to your questions, but it's kind of how it's making me feel, because these things have been bubbling beneath the surface, obviously, for a very long time.
That's okay, because you're giving us an honest appraisal of how you feel about it, and that's what this is about. So it's fantastic. And I suppose, kind of just unpicking that a little bit. We talked about action research, and we know that's a method, kind of a method of research, and to kind of just embellish on what you've just spoken about. Without getting too technical, what do you have any kind of particular methodologies or research methods that you kind of gravitate towards to kind of help you to investigate things? Given what you've just said about wanting to kind of keep it simple and keep it easy to describe, are there any things that you're attracted to in that sense?
But beyond the action experimentation kind of stuff, I suppose most things I do are a combination of some kind of survey to get some idea of scale and scope, supplemented with either or both semi-structured interviews and focus group type activities. I'm drawn more and more and more, and I expect Sue will be pleased to hear this, to the kinds of things where people reflect or try and illustrate their thinking around something using things like serious play and what have you. I think, excuse me, that old me would have been kind of dismissive of that as childish or inappropriate in an academic setting or whatever, as I was trying to come to terms with my own sense of identity as a teacher, particularly in FE, Cinderella Service and all that. But now I just see so much value in that. I mean, it's amazing what comes out of giving people an opportunity to express themselves either fully, tactilely, or in a construction way, or with an illustration. So with the new head of the Arena Centre, Danielle Tran, who I used to work with at Greenwich, we did some light touch research with GTAs on their sense of identity, that sort of liminal space between being students and being academic members of staff as they were contributing more and more to teaching. And we got them to draw personal pie charts of identity, we called them, and where they tried to divide up on a pie chart how much they saw themselves as teacher, researcher, student, academic and all that. And it was so interesting. And the discussion that came out of that, we thought it was going to be a little warmer that would take 5 minutes. And we were spending like 45 minutes. We were going, yeah, but I don't see how you can just divide it into thirds. And, it's not 50, they were just going for it. And that stimulus was just brilliant. It just worked so well. And it really did sort of consolidate my evolving thinking in, there are better ways of getting information out of people than just asking them questions. Getting them to do something, I think is quite exciting. And sometimes it's kind of serendipitous and unplanned, where the stuff really comes out, and I think you have to be prepared for that. But stuff like that I think is really interesting.
Oh, it sounds super exciting. I'd like to participate in some of that. Just let me know when. It sounds fun. Yeah, I think it's interesting because it kind of resonates. I'm just thinking about one of our previous speakers who I used to work with, Tunde Varga-Atkins, and she was talking about multimodal approaches to methodology and using lots of different ways of representing meaning with people, which is I think fascinating way of conducting research. And getting that kind of sense-making process. No, thanks. That's really interesting.
Can I just say, I'm just acknowledging the comments in the chat, and particularly Emma's comment. And if you've got anything I can read on that, Emma, I'll be really, really happy and delighted to read that. That sounds exactly like my cup of tea.
And I'd just like to echo on John's comment about can I take part of this, but I don't mind if I'm just a girl. Because honestly, you're always doing fun things. I'm sure it's a lot of hard work behind the scene, but on the face of it, you're always doing lots of fun things, and it's just great. It's so I think my next question is that the most enjoyable part of doing research, is like meeting different people and understanding, like working class academics or professional services people, like of FE colleagues, are kind of, dare I say, the underdog, and kind of understanding the perspective, like, what do you enjoy the most about doing research?
Yeah. So Emma's used the phrase imposter syndrome there, and I think that it's like battling an ailment that's going to be with you for your entire life. You never escape from it fully, though sometimes you can loosen the shackles a little bit, and ebb and flow, and doing things like that kind of research, and realizing interesting things, and then realizing that actually we're having conversations here that other people aren't having. You're creating new knowledge, or you're finding something in a different context about something, and that gives you a boost. I can legitimize myself. I can, I do deserve to be where I'm at, and I'm not in the wrong environment. And then you'll have a conversation with someone, and it can push you back down again for whatever reason, and that happens in academia. I mean, there's lots of snobbery, and there's a hierarchy, and people in different disciplines see their research as more important or more valuable than others. And it's about funding, and it's about publication. It's about the number of stars you get. And, I think this is the reason why I don't watch the Olympics, actually, because, it's all about elites, and it's all about the best of the best. And I'm actually interested in ordinary people. I couldn't really give a damn who's the best in the world at running. I couldn't give a damn who's best in the world at research and getting the most publications to their name. I'm interested in the people that you're doing the research on, but it changes how other people perceive you. So, no doubt if I played the game, I'd have been vice chancellor somewhere by now. There is a lot of doubt about that, actually. I'm just joking.
Well, I mean, if vice chancellor role were to become available, and it's voted by the public, then I'm sure you'd be in a good shout. Because actually, I'm gonna cut this bit from the recording because I'm gonna get into trouble for what I was gonna say. What I just posted in the comment is as you know, a lot of us kind of do our PhD or like finish our PhD, with a few years to follow. We're kind of still classed as kind of student, recent graduate, but a lot of us also have important jobs. And I've had my fair share of being looked down and being asked stupid questions just because I wear my PhD hat. In fact, as a recent conference, not the old conference a couple of weeks ago, that was brilliant. One that happened earlier this year. I introduced myself as a PhD researcher from Lancaster University. Not with my job title, which was Innovation and Scholarship Manager at the time. The questions I got asked were so unfair. The question I got asked was almost attacking me and my research. And I kind of had a chat with John and another colleague. And I said, if I were to introduce myself as the Innovation and Scholarship Manager from a Russell Group University, I can guarantee you none of those questions would have been asked. But that kind of in my mind, that kind of sums up academia, doesn't it? Like, the hierarchical sort of thinking. If you're not a professor, somebody, then the chances are you are a nobody.
Yeah, but I mean, I think I should, in the name of fairness, say that I've been also surrounded by the most amazing and incredible people. I work currently with some truly inspirational and outstanding people. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And where some people would happily kick you into the dirt, climb over their own grandmothers to get the next award, there are a dozen other people whose heads are screwed on right, and it's great to work with. But it is really difficult because one of the things that I've been saying about AI is that we've got a problem because we work in universities, and universities are seats of research and learning, and people who work in universities see themselves as kind of radical and values-based and people-centered and everything. But the entire institution is wedded to 19th century pedagogy practice and is very, very conservative. We're essentially change averse, even though we don't think we are. And that gives you a problem when, it takes 18 months in most universities to get approval for a module to be changed. So you're looking at 2 academic year cycles before you can change a module. That's not fast enough anymore. And it wasn't fast enough before, but it's definitely not fast enough now. And that's going to cause a lot of problems because we need to basically get over ourselves in terms of our collective identity and realize that we are conservative and risk averse and change averse, and all of the policies that you can have on transformation and all that kind of stuff are meaningless unless you actually put some momentum behind that and effect some proper change and enable people to change, where currently the system just grinds you down. And it's a really weird position to be in, because you advocate for change based on existing research people aren't interesting. Yeah, but what about in my discipline? You give people the opportunity to do research in their discipline, and they give you a proposal that's going to take 3 years. Well, that's useless when it comes to the impact of generative AI on certain disciplines or ways of working, or all this kind of stuff. So I think we just got to speed up a little bit and be a little bit more risk taking and consider what the benefits of being so risk averse and conservative are, and be honest that they are limited, and be honest about the limitations of that as well, because sometimes the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about now. I'm waffling. Sorry.
But John just put in a comment, like, we've all experienced COVID as educators, as people who work in higher education or education in general. We taught people to use Teams and online meetings pretty much overnight. I mean, what we're doing now was a thing that most people were like, hold on a second, I can't do it, like mere 4 or 5 years ago. So it can change. And those really, like John was saying, they're just rubbish. It's just, I think it's the lack of will from some people. They just, well, things are working okay. Why bother? Well, okay, it's not good enough, is it?
Not for me, no.
Exactly.
No, especially if people are already marginalised, further marginalised by the structures and the systems and the way that we do things. It's just not good enough. People get hung up on tiny little details. Oh, we can't use that tool because one of the things in this particular digital tool doesn't work very well with screen readers. And you go, yeah, well, okay, it's very noble, and and you focus on this tiny little thing, but then the entire website isn't suitable for people using screen readers. And you think, where are the priorities? Why are we obsessing over that tiny little detail when we haven't fixed that? And well, that's always been like that. We first designed this website in 1897. Using Charles Babbage's famous system. I mean, the whole thing is just so frustrating sometimes. Luckily, of course, King's isn't like that, and we're perfect in every way.
I'm sure. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, what you're doing is great from, looking from a distance. We never work together properly, but I wouldn't mind. I would like the opportunity to do some work with you, and I'm sure other people would as well. I'm mindful of time, and I don't want the two of us to dominate the questions. I just wondered if anyone has any question you'd like to ask Martin that isn't about AI, please. Unless you are really,
I don't mind questions.
Really,
I've got lots of opinions on it, that's for sure.
Anyone has got any comments or questions for Martin?
You can just type them in the chat. We can read them out for you if you like.
I think I had just arrived at his destination because he was driving earlier.
Emma, you've got a question.
Please. Hello. Thanks, Martin. It was a question around the compassionate approach to pedagogy and practically what we can do to support staff in enabling that approach that is both compassionate to the students but also self-compassionate to the academics, because I feel like quite often we implement lots of stuff for learners, but then that results is in staff taking on more cognitive load or emotional load as a result.
So my colleague Becky, who I mentioned earlier, and I put together when we were both still at UCL, actually, what we called a humanifesto for pedagogy of care. And in some ways, I think that the items in the manifesto address key parts of your question there. That so one of the things that we talk about is how valuable it can be to be prepared to show vulnerability in certain ways. So as I have done in this meeting, I haven't kept it all formal. It's about my professional life. I've talked about some of my personal life, but we know that, for example, women teachers and academics are scored less favorably than their male counterparts in student evaluation surveys. So there might be reasons why female academics and teachers are less reluctant to expose themselves to sort of that sort of degree of vulnerability, feeling already that there are vulnerabilities there. So these are sort of principles for discussion rather than absolute lines in the sand. But I think that the answer to your question is you start talking about this kind of stuff, is that you surface it. And we designed the manifesto as a heuristic for discussion so that you can talk about ways in which you can actually realize this and make this happen. So I don't know if colleagues are able to follow the link that I've put in the chat, but humanizing things, understanding the value of connecting at human level and modeling caring. I mean, when you write this down and you say it out loud, it sounds like the most obvious thing. But a lot of people don't approach their teaching in that way, particularly people who are new to teaching, GTAs who we do a lot of support for. And, some PGCEs still teach primary and secondary school teachers the mantra, don't smile until Christmas. What a load of nonsense that is. I don't want to put my kid in a class where the teacher doesn't smile at them until Christmas. And, when do you stop becoming a kid and become a teen and an adolescent and adult? We're all humans and we all respond to smiling. That's why smiling is such an important part of the way that humans interact with each other and build trust and show warmth and all of that. Use of names, all of these kinds of things. So those are the kinds of things that we talk about and challenge some of the myths around whether you should or shouldn't, how stern you should be, and how you control the space and all of that. And talking about things like behavior management, which is the big anxiety for novice teachers, I think, is also about how you manage your own anxiety in that space and have some strategies and approaches that you can utilize that will enable you to realize a more compassionate and human level approach while still protecting yourself as and your own professional identity. And it's a balancing act, but it can only come through individualized action research. And that can only happen if there's an openness and a preparedness and a sense of agency that you can allow yourself to do that. Because so many people go into, I was telling someone earlier today, this is from when I was first working at Greenwich. I was observing a class, and colleague that I was observing, this is for the PG Cert, was strutting up and down in a lecture hall doing the grand lecture, all of this, pontificating for an hour. And there were 3 students in the room. And I asked him afterwards, I said, why did you do that style of lecture? When you only had 3 people there and you could have been sat round a table talking about this stuff. And he said, well, it says lecture on my timetable, so I thought I had to do a lecture. And if we've got highly intelligent, supremely well qualified people perceiving a word on a timetable as the thing that directs them towards the way in which they teach, then we've got to overcome that. And the only way we can overcome that is by saying, you don't bloody well have to do it like that. You have agency. You can do it. How might I do it? Well, what about this? It can only be done through facilitated conversations. Now, that doesn't lead to transformation at scale, but it does chip away a little bit. And the more people that do this kind of thing and model this kind of thing, the more it filters in to the psyche and the consciousness. So, I mean, that's a really lengthy answer to your question, Emma, but that's kind of how I try and approach everything that I do. It's not efficient and it takes time, but if you put 50 or 100 GTAs in front of me and I tell them that, I think that's made a lot of difference to a lot of people in a fairly short amount of time. It's changing the people who, or giving agency to people who've been doing it for 4 or 5 years, that I think is quite difficult. stuck in a way, and now very anxious to move out of that.
Thanks,
I've got a
Martin.
question from the chat, and we'll come to you soon in a minute. We've got a question from Georgia. All things considered, what keeps you going?
Well, I don't quite know what the answer to that question is. I think my daughter helps a lot. Because the way life turned out, you know, I've basically been parent to a child for 30 years. My son's just coming up to 31. He turned 18 when my daughter was born. So I think that the necessity of having a certain amount of vigor, whereas a lot of people my age might be considering their retirement and putting a blanket over their knees at this age, and God knows that's a tempting outlook sometimes. But the fact that things are slow to change, also more of a serious answer, I think does keep you going, because yes, change can happen. Yes, I can effect change, albeit at a small scale. But the longer in the tooth that I become, and the more that people read my blog or whatever, or come to things like this and say, oh yeah, I quite liked what he said about this thing. The rest of it was a load of rubbish or whatever. But, you know, even if I sow a seed, then, you know, that makes it worthwhile, right? You know, I don't get enough people saying that was really useful, because I probably need to hear that every single day, to not because I'm an egomaniac, but because I need reassurance to keep me out of the imposter syndrome doldrums. Why the heck am I talking? What am I going on about? I mean, when I first started teaching, I literally had out of body experiences where I'd suddenly be in the top corner of the room looking down on me teaching and seeing the kids writing what I was saying in their books and doing what I was telling them, thinking, what is going on? Why are they even listening to me? But I still get that sometimes, you know. Why are these people listening to me? What the heck have I just said that was that interesting? I can't even remember what I said. What, you know, so I have to have that reassurance. And by helping people and changing things, I get that. And it's like a buzz, and it's satisfying, and it persuades me that it's worth carrying on. So yeah, come back in 10 years and I'll be even grayer, less hair, longer in the tooth, but hopefully still saying the same things.
Thank you, Martin. Sue.
There we go. Hiya, thanks very much. I'm going to take you back a couple of years to when you did an LTHE chat. You led it with Amina Payne and Sophie Kennedy, I think it was. So it was on supporting and humanising behavioural change without behaviourism, nudges and digital footprints.
That's right.
And one of the things, the provocations that you put in there was, you know, LMS data are not indicators of students' potential merit. Thank you. Yes, agree. So the question is, how do you feel nudges can be used positively? What should we be doing?
I think that what I've just described is the kind of nudge that I really value. So, like I say, a lot of my students are my colleagues, so it's a messy picture for me. But the same applies when I'm working with undergraduate students, is that I don't think we value enough the importance of praise, showing value, recognition, acknowledgement, showing people that they belong, that they exist, that you've heard them, you know, and it can come down to really sort of like microcosmic methods of acknowledgement. So, you know, active listening suggests that you tilt your head slightly and you look intently at someone and really, you know, nod to say, I am listening. And one of the things that you do as a teacher, particularly when you've got a really big group, if I've got 200 students in front of me, I would exaggerate all of my gestures, you know, like I'm on stage at a theatre. And this isn't showing off, as some people I think characterize that kind of performance teaching. It's because people at the back need to see that I'm nodding at that really good comment, and then have me say, yeah, that is great, exactly that. That's, you know, I really go overboard with that. And I, you know, I really make the effort amongst my colleagues, particularly the junior colleagues, to say, that is brilliant. Okay, maybe we can work on something else. So there's that aspect which nudges people towards engagement and positive interaction. And that is something that you do at the human level. But then there's the other stuff. It may be partly data driven. It may just be acknowledging where different people are at different stages. And that is to enable people to move to whatever is their next level. So the nudge is saying, look, it doesn't matter where you are, climbing this ladder or going up these stairs or climbing this mountain or whatever metaphor you want to use, we all ultimately end up going at our own pace, even though the system demands that we all go together, So how do we assist that? And that's what the nudges are. It's giving people the understanding that there are different ways of being, seeing, doing, knowing. There are different ways of getting from A to B, and there are different ways of participating and valuing that. So, I think you and I have probably spoken about this before, Sue, but, in discussion forums, there's nothing wrong with being a lurker. It's a perfectly legitimate way of engaging with that kind of content. It's a horrible word for it, but actually it's engagement, and that suits some people. So I'm not going to nudge them to force them to participate in a different way, but nudging them onto the forum might be something that I would do. So I'm dancing around the houses here a little bit, but I think it's a really nice way of recognizing that people need constant prompting towards the kind of behaviors that will get them over the line. And very often it's the people that you think have the most self-efficacy and the most confidence who are masking the reality. So don't deny anybody the nudges. Don't deny anybody the smile. Don't deny anybody the praise, because you don't know what's happening beneath the surface. That's what I would say.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so we're going to draw the session to a close. I'm sure Martin wouldn't mind anyone approaching him on social media and starting a conversation. That's how we met, and the rest is, as they say, history. So once again, thank you very much for your time, Martin. It's been a really interesting conversation.